Hey everyone. So this is an update on my dad's DNA results. Um, I originally had made a video about his DNA results, and on my account on Ancestry, I admitted both my parents' kits, and I have had several DNA cousins share their DNA results, share their DNA pages, if you will, with my account, so I have them on there as well. And come to find out, after really scrutinizing stuff and really kind of being like, this is 25% Italy Greece is really weird, I double checked and I had the wrong DNA estimates. Those were for someone else, not my dad. Oops. So that was kind of embarrassing. So this is the updated uh, video for my dad's DNA results. Um, Discussing his results on both Ancestry DNA and on Family Tree DNA. Uh, as I stated in my previous video, my dad, by record trail, by paper trail as we call it, is mostly Acadian French. He has some Basque ancestors. He has some First Nation ancestors from Nova Scotia, most likely Micmac. It's a Native American tribe, for those that don't know, predominantly out of New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and parts of Maine. And he has some Spanish ancestry, and this is all in the last 500 or so years. Some of his lines, one or two of his lines, actually trace back much farther than that. So, he's a descendant of the Saint Etienne de la Tour family, whose mother, Charles de la Tour, whose mother was Marie de Salazar. That line traces back to Spain in the 1400s to Juan de Salazar, or Jean, as he became known. He fought for the French kings. I think it was Claude, maybe, or Charles. And he was granted land because of his efforts. And I'm trying to think of what else. His great grandmother on records was supposedly Irish. Annie Walsh. She married Olivier Saunier. And on her records, both her parents, James and Ellen Walsh, are purported to have been coming from Ireland. I haven't been able to find any trace of them at all. So I don't know anything else about that line. In his third great grandmother, up his father's side, his father's paternal line, was Mary Duone, daughter of Joseph Duone and Mary Mayo, born in Chatham, Massachusetts in 1750. Her father died, and her mother remarried Samuel Freeman, and he moved the entire family up to Liverpool, Nova Scotia the mid to late 1760s, where Mary met Pierre Lanoux, who somehow either escaped deportation during the Acadian expulsion, or he was like some sources, like there's a story passed on in Pierre's brother's line, I guess. I found some online references to it in North Carolina, because that's where his mother and his brothers were sent. His older brother Amand supposedly escaped the Acadian expulsion. But anyways, it talks about, on this site, pertaining, because Basil, as he became known, became pretty prominent and well-to-do. And it gives reference to a brother, George's or Charles, and Pierre having run away after being brought down to the Carolinas. And then Pierre ends up in Liverpool, Nova Scotia. So I'm not really sure what the story is there. I'm still kind of working that out. But she met Pierre Lanoux, got married there, had a bunch of kids in Liverpool, and then they moved to Bay Sainte Marie, Digby County, Nova Scotia, and had the remaining children there. And Mary Duone is a documented descendant of one or two Mayflower families, William Brewster, Stephen Hopkins, as well as a lot of other early Great Migration families from England to New England. So my dad has some English ancestry there as well. I'm trying to think of what else. He's got one or two lines in his Akkadian side that became Akkadian that were that became Akkadian. One was Basque, the Bastardach family, and the other was one of his Doucet lines. He comes from all three major Doucet families. Germain Doucet, who was born in France, Germain Doucet, who a lot of people for a long time thought was Germain the older's son, but turns out not to be. Germain Doucet, who was proven by Y-DNA results from his male descendants to be First Nations, Native American. And then he comes from Jean dit Irlandais Doucet. John Doucet, Jean. He was from Ireland, according to records of the time, and there is some speculation in the genealogical community that his last name might have been Dowsett. But there's no real pinpoint proof. That's still up for debate. But the family name became Doucet. He either took it on or it was a spin on his original surname. We don't really know. So he was Irish. The Bastardach family, the Basque family. I'm pretty sure that's the only Basque line that we have. I might not be right on that, but I have to double check my tree. Anyways, so that's what he is for the most part on paper trail. And his results, I took some photos, because again, my phone doesn't like to videotape, and I cannot minimize my recording screen to look at other screens on my computer, because it just shuts off the recording. And for those not in the know, French Acadians are what we call an endogamous genetic group. Excuse me. Much like Ashkenazi Jewish people, much like there's a couple of other ancestral groupings that also fall under that category, but basically they're really related to each other. For instance, my dad has a DNA match who's predicted to be his third cousin, who, thanks to the fact that this person and myself have done our trees extensively, we already know how they're related. Ancestry thankfully just brings that right up, being like, hey, you've both done your trees, here's your path of relationship. Well, this supposed genetic third cousin is actually my dad's seventh cousin, and seventh cousin once removed 12 different ways. Let that sink in for a minute. So, the last time this person's family lines and my dad and mine family lines have been within a generation of each other was 6 or so generations ago. For my dad, anyways, 6 to 7 generations ago. Or would it be 8? Anyways. So, we're really related to each other. You'll find in genealogy of Akkadian French, not overly so, but it's not uncommon. You'll find third cousins getting married to each other. You'll find fifth cousins getting married to each other. So, like, often when I find, when a DNA match reaches out to me and they happen to be Cajun, from Louisiana, more often than not, I can automatically kind of do a process of elimination. I get contacted. Oh, hey, the ancestry says we're fourth cousins or third cousins. I'd love to figure out how we're related. And they're like, I live in, Lafayette, Louisiana. Where do you live? And I'm like, yeah, okay, Louisiana, you're probably Cajun, which means that our family lines haven't been in the same family, like brother sister, since like probably 1750s, 1760s. That's generally what I find to be the case. Not always, but sometimes. And so, we're really genetically related to each other because we share a lot of common family lines. Back then, if you were an Akkadian, you likely married another Akkadian. So because of that, it can sometimes make tracking down family lines a little difficult if you haven't already done the work, or if you're trying to get through a brick wall, are in some cases just trying to figure out where you connect. There's this one woman who's a genetic match to my dad. We have tons of the same surnames in our family. Detremont, Como, LeBlanc, a bunch of all these names, and we have compared pedigrees. We cannot figure out where we connect, even though, like, her lines have only been traced back so far. So, we know the connect is there somewhere. Like, all the Boudreaux in the United States and Canada, whether you spell your name Drot or Boudreau or Eaux or Eault, we're all related. We all descend from Michel Boudreau and Michel Lacoin. Incidentally, Michel Lacoin, her father or her brother, I think it's Malcolm. Why are you growling? Come here. Sorry, my dog is growling out the window. You're fine, baby. Nobody's gonna come in here and eat me. You're good. Sorry. The Acoin family, Madonna, famous Madonna, and Ellen DeGeneres are both descendants of Martin Acoin, who was related to Michelle Acoin, who married Michel Boudreau. So I'm like, I don't know, 9th and 10th cousins with them, or something to that effect. So I thought that was kind of cool. Most of the time, all the Comos are related. Most of the time, not the Italian Como. Most of the time, all the Sauniers are related. They all come from Louis Saunier. All the LeBlancs come from Daniel LeBlanc, and I will follow that up with not all LeBlancs are Acadian LeBlancs. There were two different LeBlanc families that came to Canada. One being Daniel LeBlanc and his descendants, and the other being a different LeBlanc. And for a long time, the Acadian LeBlanc, up until I think the last 100 or so years, typically was spelled with an uppercase B. And the French-Canadian LeBlanc spelled their LeBlanc with a lowercase b. And that for a long time, that's at least what I was taught, and that for a long time that's how people were able to differentiate whether or not their LeBlancs were Acadian or not. That has changed in recent generations. Some who used to have the lowercase b now spell it with the uppercase B, and vice versa. So it makes it a little more difficult. So yeah, I'll stop chattering away and start getting into the actual DNA results of my dad. And yes, I triple checked this. These are my dad's DNA results. Speaking of the endogamy, my dad last night. Now, Ancestry, for anybody who uses Ancestry.com and uses it for DNA, they do one test only, the autosomal DNA test, which will see, your ethnic background or ethnic estimations or origin estimations and, ancestral estimations. And also who you're related to in their database. When they give predictions thereof. And when it says you have X amount of X amount of fourth cousins or closer, it actually should be fourth through sixth cousin or closer, because that's typical. Because that actually is what shows. Is you click on it and it shows you, oh, this person username DJ, admin by Sunshine59 or something like that. It will show predicted range fourth to sixth cousin, if what they predict, fourth cousin, So it's actually, that's what it should say. It should say fourth through sixth or closer, not just fourth cousin or closer. But my dad last night, he broke 12,000 matches. And this is not just 12,000 total. This is 12,000 matches at fourth or through sixth cousins or closer. 12,700 fourth through sixth cousins or closer. Now, I know from looking at a lot of his DNA matches, they're not actually his fourth cousins. They're not his fifth cousins. A lot of them are within that like range genetically, but by paper trail, they're related 5 different ways. Or, for instance, he does have one third cousin who is an actual third cousin once removed or something like that, but this person is also his like 5th and 6th and 7th cousin as well. It gets kind of confusing and it can become a headache. It sometimes can be a bit of a nightmare. So his ancestry, his genetic ancestry prediction, and this is thousands of years ago ethnicity estimate for ancestry. He's 95% European. 38% of that being Great Britain. Now, I did look at the map on Ancestry. Great Britain does encompass a small bit of France. He is 26% Iberian Peninsula. And that actually, since their rollout, that actually, and I looked back at old screenshots I had taken of his amounts. I'm pretty sure that actually went up a little bit, by like a couple of percents. And he is 21% Europe West. And low confidence region, he is 5% West Asian. And within that, it's under the Caucasus. There you go. The Caucasus, which is the Black Sea region, Georgia, that area of the world. The Great Britain, that's a pretty high amount. I mean, if it's not actually reflecting ancestry that came from France, I don't know. Maybe his great grandmother was actually English and not Irish. I don't know. And the Iberian Peninsula, that's another thing that I found that a lot of my dad's DNA matches have in common with him, is they have a lot of Akkadian people who have done DNA that I know of. A lot of them do report that they have a pretty high amount of Iberian Peninsula, which is Portugal, Spain. Now, I'm not really so sure that it's reflecting his Basque ancestry, because as far as I know, he's only got 1 or 2 ancestral lines that are Basque, and that's like the 1600s. And I don't really understand, like, I don't think that would account for 26%. And as far as I know, his Basque ancestry would be technically considered French Basque. I know he does have some Spanish ancestry back in the early 1600s, going into the 1400s. Again, don't think it would account for that high amount. So yeah, I mean, it's something I think there's something definitely there. Like a lot of other DNA matches my dad has in common with, or shares DNA with, they also have a pretty high amount. Like my dad's apparently a quarter Spanish or Portuguese, according to his genetics. And it's again, that's a pretty high amount. So it really makes me wonder at the origins of the Akkadian people. Like, where did they come from before they were in France? Or, like, are they, like, like, I can kind of imagine that they'd be, like, a conglomeration or a mixture of different peoples, people migrating to France and then settling in an area and migrating in with the people that live there. It wouldn't shock me at all. Unfortunately, DNA testing is illegal in France, and much to many of us, much to our dismay. And it's it's not like we have people who have DNA tested in France that we know are related to our Akkadian lines who have tested. It would be really interesting if sometime down the line we're able to really lock in to the history of the Akkadian people in France, and where they come from, and who their ancestors were. And then he is 21% Europe West. I think I already went over that. In Europe West, that is France, Germany, Switzerland, Austria, that type of thing. And then on family tree DNA, he again is 95% European, 42% of that is West and Central Europe. 20% Iberia, which is Iberia Peninsula, Spain, Portugal, same thing. 17% British Isles. Now, on Ancestry, Great Britain does not encompass Ireland. Not at all. Ireland is its own little grouping. On Family Tree DNA, British Isles does encompass Ireland. So, okay, my dad is supposedly part Irish. His great-grandmother supposedly was Irish. And if not full Irish, at least half. Assumingly full Irish, because on all of her records, her parents were from Ireland. So that would mean that my dad's grandfather, William Sawyer, would have been half Irish. In turn, that would make my grandmother, my dad's mother, a quarter Irish. So even still, I would, like, at the bare minimum. So even still, I'm surprised that no Irish shows up. And the British Isle amount in here is much lower than his Great Britain amount. His Great Britain amount on Ancestry is 38%, whereas British Isles is 17%. That's a nearly 20% difference. On Family Tree DNA, he is also 16% Southeast Europe, which is Italy, Greece. And then trace amounts on Family Tree DNA are less than 2% Finland and less than 1% South America. Now, I did go into this a little bit on my previous video. I do have a paper trail to 3 different First Nation ancestors. Jean-Claude, Germaine Doucette, and Anne-Marie, who married Pinet, a man with the last name of Pinet. There's still some debate on what his first name was. She had one son, Philippe Pinet, who I come from. And Anne-Marie went on later to marry René Rimbault and had like 11 kids with him. She has been proven both by her paper trail and her mitochondrial, her being First Nation. Same with Germaine Doucette with his Y-DNA, and same with Jean-Claude with his Y-DNA. So my dad comes from those 3, 2 of whom he comes from twice. So I'm slightly surprised that, on the one hand, that, yes, it showed up. Awesome, cool, it's there. The paper trail's correct. Woohoo, like, great. But I'm also kind of surprised that it's under 1%. Now, I mean, it's possible I should not be surprised. I mean, given all the other ancestry that my dad comes from, and given how far back it is. I mean, this is like late 1600s, for the most part. So it's just possible, just didn't transfer down that much. However, and this is where endogamy makes everything kind of tricky. My dad matches not only the founder and admin of I can't even pronounce the name. It's a DNA project on Family Tree DNA, and it's a Micmac DNA project, Métis DNA project, and it's a particular group out of New Brunswick, actually. And my dad matches like 75% of the members. And a lot of these members are not like, oh, we have a little bit of Native American. No, like, they're like a quarter, they're a half. And they're kind of like, you and your dad are DNA matches to us. How are you related? They do have Acadian lines, so it's possible that that's just where the link is, but it's just kind of like, it gets confusing. So that, it was surprising that it showed up. I was happy it showed up. But what was also kind of confusing, and I did talk about this in my other video, is, maybe they just need to fine tune it. A lot of my dad's DNA matches who do have documented paper trail to First Nation ancestry, who have that result on their DNA, they're grouped with North America with their DNA. Now, I know that this is going off of reference populations, and I know a lot of Native American people have not tested, and I understand their reasons for not wanting to test. I totally get it. But it still kind of made me kind of scratch my head. Like my dad's apparently is based out of South America. Hmm. And that's the shading for the South American area that his DNA is pinpointed to. So either they just need to fine tune their algorithm, their computer programs, or the way they figure that out, or that's the closest reference population that my dad matched. I'm not really sure. Or there's something of my family tree that I'm missing. And then his Finland amount right there. Now, before Family Tree DNA updated their results, my dad was actually 2% Finland Northern Siberian, as was I. And the Italy Greece, that's new. Beforehand. Oh, let me rephrase that. Beforehand, before Family Tree DNA updated their origins results, Southern Europe was the lower part of Italy, the lower part of Spain and Portugal going into Italy, Greece. Now it is Southeast Europe is its own grouping, and Iberia is separate from that. So he's 16% Southeast Europe, which is Italy, Greece. And so there's that, and here's his British Isles amount. And here's his Iberian Peninsula, or his Iberian. And as you can see, yeah, Spain and Portugal, pretty much. And here is his Central and West, Central West, Western Central, West and Central Europe. This is his West and Central Europe amount, or grouping, if you will, on the map. It's hard to make out because it makes the words kind of disappear. But, and yeah, I'm not entirely surprised that that's high, given that he's predominantly Acadian French when you take into consideration his paper trail. So who knows? I mean, maybe the Acadian people were initially a mix of people that came from that area of Europe, Switzerland, Germany, France area, and migrated further into France, and maybe they intermixed with people who were from Spain. I don't know. But it's definitely interesting to kind of figure out. So yeah, those are my dad's DNA results. I was really shocked that Ireland did not come up at all on his Ancestry DNA results. Now, initially, before they updated his results, yes, he had he had Irish on there, but he was like 3%. I was quite shocked. So it really kind of makes me wonder what's going on with his Walsh line. There were several other Walsh families that migrated to Nova Scotia from Ireland, excuse me, that all seem to be related, but my Walsh line doesn't seem to link in with anybody's. And let's see if I can find the photo I took. Oh yeah, and the genetic communities, my dad, of course, belong. Three guesses what that one is. You guessed it. Acadian French and Acadians and Canadian Maritimes. Within that or from that, the larger grouping, blanket grouping of Acadians, which the shaded areas on the map are New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Louisiana. So, excuse me. So yeah, he's Acadian French, definitely. I think over 11,000, I think it said, of his DNA matches also share this genetic community, and it was like, yeah, that's a big shock. I'm still, I'm still struggling with the whole. Like, I have my days where I'm like, okay, we're all related to each other, no biggie. And then I have my days where I just kind of thunk my head on my desktop, going, oh my god, I am so related to so many people. Like, it just kind of boggles my mind. Like, yeah, a lot of these DNA matches, we're not related. Like, our families haven't been the same family for, realistically, like 6, 7 generations, but genetically we're really related. My dad has a lot of cousins. And just kind of some days it boggles my mind. And it just makes me just go, "Are you kidding me?" Usually insert, "Are you bleeping kidding me?" Um, I remember the first time I got my dad's results, I nearly chortled my coffee all over my laptop because he had over 3,000 matches at predicted range of fourth through sixth cousin or closer. And that was just the first day I got his results, like brand new. Whereas, by comparison, mind you, my mom has 488 DNA matches at fourth through sixth or closer total. 488 over 12,000. Holy crap, Batman! So yeah, um, it's an intriguing challenge to try to figure out how all these people are related and try to actually trace it back on the family tree. And as I said, a good chunk of these people are not his third cousins or not his fourth cousins. They, like, one or two of them, they maybe his like fifth cousin, and then they're like his eighth cousin 3 times. Um, Excuse me, that's more often than not what I do find to be true when the other person and I start really delving into the lines. Um, but as I stated, he does have a few DNA matches who actually are his third or fourth cousins, and they're also like his fifth 3 times and his seventh 8 times, 2 times or something like that. So it really makes it difficult to just. It's kind of impossible to pinpoint just one line. Um, I come from my dad and I come from most of the founding Acadian families. Doucet, Surette, Como, LeBlanc, Saunier or Sonia, Thibodeau, Devo, Theriot, Amiral, um, Babin, Bastardach, uh, Borch, um, Landry. Uh, I'm just there's I know there's quite a few I'm not even mentioning, but yeah, I mean it's Foret or Forest, Lord. Um, you could give me a list of Acadian families, founding families, and I probably got 80 to 90% of them. So it's an intriguing mystery in of itself to try to figure out how some of these people are related to my dad. Um, and there's also an intriguing mystery in trying to line up or trying to reconcile the general estimations of his origins. You know, I've noted a lot of Acadian French people when they do DNA tests. A lot of them have a high amount of Iberian Peninsula, and not everyone who's Acadian French descends from some of the founding Basque families that became Acadian because they kept marrying into Acadian families over the generations. Um, so yeah, it's an interesting conundrum. I hope you enjoyed my video. Um, and yes, again, these are my dad's results. I double checked both counts. And hopefully this video makes a little more sense than the last. And again, I would definitely, no matter who you are, I would definitely suggest doing a DNA test. There are several different companies out there that um, that do. I think I'll just say the differences between family tree DNA and ancestry used to be much bigger. I mean, it's still an evolving science. It's, some of the smaller amounts, yes, have to be considered with a grain of salt. It's not like, uh, for me, it's more of a purpose of, helping to either prove or disprove or shore up the paper trail research I've already done. If you're really serious about your family ancestry, start researching the records. Start, interview your living family members. Write down what they know. People, places, and dates are important, or even estimations of dates are important. And start researching up the records. And don't get me wrong, there are plenty of instances where some records are wrong. Some people lied on records. Some people hid information. Some people, children born out of wedlock, or somebody got remarried, and so their child took on the surname of their step parent. It's not an uncommon occurrence. Or children were adopted within families. Um, there are several different scenarios that have happened. But do the research. You'll be surprised what you'll find out. Um, and for myself, the DNA results, yes, the estimation part is only one part of it, which I forgot to mention in my previous video. It's only one small portion of of the whole process of doing your DNA. Like, yeah, it's really cool to see where my ancestry comes from in the last several thousand years, let alone the last couple hundred years. However, it's really much more useful with connecting with cousins, and like there's one DNA cousin on my mother's side that we're trying to figure out how we're related, and we've made headway. And another respect on my mother's side, I had done some paper trail research and gone up one of my mom's lines and connected with another researcher who came from a sibling of one of my ancestors, and we were pretty convinced that we had the correct information and that we were cousins, we were related, but we weren't 100% sure. It wasn't until we both did our DNA and we found out we were DNA matches that we were able to confirm that our record research was correct. Um, so, in a lot of respects, DNA tests can confirm or not confirm your own family tree research. It can help you break down brick walls, which is what I have done on several of my lines. Is my DNA results, my parents' DNA results have definitely helped me uh, immensely with my paper trail research. Not necessarily to help create a line, but to shore up the paper trail research that you've already done. Um, and sometimes it can give you clues on where to look. And by clues, I mean, like, my mom has a DNA match who's from Norway. We can't seem to figure out how we're related. My mom's also apparently like 20% Scandinavian. Maybe there's something there. Um, so it's quite interesting to delve into and really look. And it again, the ethnicity results, they're an evolving science. Um, my dad's like Finland DNA. He probably had an ancestor from that region of the world 1,000 years ago. Who knows? Um, Sometimes little bits of DNA can hang on for many, many, many generations, and sometimes they don't. It's all luck of the draw. When my parents had me, when I was created, their DNA got recombined that they inherited from their family, and it became me. So your DNA is reshuffled and recombined as each generation happens. So those amounts get smaller, but may not be smaller evenly along the line. And I've been yammering away for long enough. So that's my video on my dad. I hope you all enjoyed it, and yeah, have fun.